أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Today is the third class on the Kitab, the Ilahiyat min Kitab al-Shifa of Ibn Sina, the metaphysical portion of the cure, the healing, the Kitab al-Shifa by Ibn Sina. In the previous two classes, we covered the first Fasl. Second class, we covered the second Fasl, and now we will be on the third Fasl. These are all from al-Maqalة الأولى, the first discourse, which consists of actually 8 fasls or sections or chapters. In the Michael Marmura translation, he renders the word maqala as book, and he renders the term fasl as chapter rather than section. In any case, the first fasl or chapter or section was devoted to setting the scene, so to speak, as to what the subject matter of first philosophy is, and how it may be related to the other sciences. So the first fasl in the Arabic was في ابتداء طلب موضوع الفلسفة الأولى لتتبين إنيته في العلوم. Marmura renders that as on beginning to seek the subject of first philosophy so that its individual quiddity among the sciences become evident. The second chapter was then devoted to determining what the genuine subject matter of the science is supposed to be. في تحصيل موضوع هذا العلم, on attaining the subject matter of the science in the Marmura translation. And the third fasl then is في منفعة هذا العلم ومرتبته واسمه, on the benefit of the science. And then Marmura has the order in which it is studied and its name. I might prefer to say maybe the rank instead of martaba, and in which it is studied is in square brackets. So that's an explanatory phrase introduced by Marmura and does not occur in the Arabic. And then it says, and its name. In other words, what do we call this science? So again, we have to understand that what Ibn Sina is trying to do, as I have emphasized in the other classes as well, is something new. He's really trying to rework the metaphysics of Aristotle and truly establish metaphysics, first philosophy, the divine science, on firm footing. All right, so I think I pointed out in the second lecture, the second class, about how the metaphysics of Aristotle as a work, as a book, had been pretty much neglected for centuries, and that there was scarcely a person you could find who really understood what the book was about. And that was a direct quote which I think I read out in the second class from a book by Lloyd Garrison, Professor Lloyd Garrison, entitled Aristotle and Other Platonists, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Was that the book? So Ibn Sina is trying then, really for the first time in history, since Aristotle himself made the attempt to set out really all philosophical knowledge. That's really what the Shifa is about. The Shifa is a large book. We're, of course, only looking at the metaphysics portion. But that's what Ibn Sina was trying to do. He was working within a kind of Aristotelian tradition, which had flourished in Alexandria in late antiquity and comes into the Islamic world through translations. And there's a very interesting essay on this. In other words, what exactly Ibn Sina was trying to do. And it's published as part of Dimitri Gutis's work called Avicenna and the Aristotelian Tradition, Introduction to Reading Avicenna's Philosophical Works. This is in the second revised and enlarged edition, including an inventory of Avicenna's authentic works. This is published by E.J. Brill, Leiden, 2014. This book was originally, the first edition actually came out, I think, very early on. It was like 1998. It was a much smaller book. So starting on page 359, going from 359 until 386, he has an essay called Avicenna's Philosophical Project. And he relates it to Aristotle's philosophical project. So I just want to read a few excerpts from this. So if we look on page 363, now obviously we're taking this a little bit from the middle, so from the middle of this essay or this chapter. So Gutis says on page 363, the course of studies or philosophical curriculum which he followed, he is Ibn Sina, as he reports in the autobiography, is patterned according to the classification of the philosophical sciences in the Aristotelian tradition of Alexandria in late antiquity. Logic comes first as the instrument, the organon, as it's called in Greek, for the study of philosophy, followed by theoretical philosophy, which consists of physics, Aristotle's physical and zoological treatises. If you don't know, I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but Aristotle was a very accomplished student of the living world. He's a biologist, a zoologist, and he has a lot of his writings devoted to this. It might interest you to note that he came from a medical family. His father was a physician, and he may well have also passed on some of this, some aspects perhaps of the healing art to Aristotle. So his family was part of this kind of a holy guild of healers. His father, known as the Asclepiads, because Asclepius was the god of healing. So there's a little footnote there. So the organon for the study of philosophy, followed by theoretical philosophy, would consist of physics, Aristotle's physical and zoological treatises, mathematics, the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. So there's these four subjects known as the quadrivium under mathematics, and metaphysics. This would be followed by practical philosophy, which would be ethics, household management, tadbir al-manzil, right? And then politics. But Avicenna does not say anything explicitly about having studied these subjects in the autobiography and so forth. So, skipping a bit further down the page, Gutis says, Avicenna was in fact following a curriculum based on a classification of the sciences and exhibiting an understanding of the philosophy of education that was very influential in imperial and late antique times and throughout the Middle Ages in many languages. It largely set the framework both for the kind of knowledge in high learning that was to be translated and transmitted, and for the way in which it was to be studied. The ultimate origin of this classification and theoretical structure of the sciences was the addition of Aristotle's esoteric works, i.e., the extant school treatises, apparently by Andronicus of Rhodes, in the second half of the 1st century. So I've had the opportunity to mention, I think, either in other classes or maybe I mentioned this in other contexts to you before, that the treatises of Aristotle, his works, were put together presumably by someone named Andronicus of Rhodes in the second half of the 1st century BCE. That the writings of Aristotle passed on to a student of his named Theophrastus, and then somehow they end up in Alexandria, and this fellow Andronicus of Rhodes. And so I think I've mentioned this to you before. But this edition, then, this collection by Andronicus of Rhodes becomes a kind of curriculum that was used to instruct people who were interested in this subject, who came to learn this subject. And the classification that's found there in the treatises of Aristotle was a classification that was used in those days to reflect all knowledge, insofar as each part of that classification reflected a book by Aristotle. So his works were obviously of an encyclopedic range, but they're not very well arranged necessarily, or well set out, or well systematically. They weren't written as a systematic work. Okay. That's my point. So what we find in Ibn Sina, however, is an attempt to bring some order to this. So on page 364, Goethe says, this traditional classification of the Aristotelian corpus, and by extension of all philosophy, presented a blueprint for an all-encompassing book of knowledge. It's a blueprint, though, or an encyclopedia of unified science that was already hinted at in some later statements by Aristotle himself. So in a perfect Aristotelian world, the material gathered in the corpus of Aristotle's writings will be systematically presented, and the logical structure of the system will follow the pattern of the posterior analytics. It's a thing he wrote on Mantiq. So throughout the long history of Aristotelianism, Goethe continues, until Avicenna, followers and adherents never actualized, that's important, never actualized this implicit, comprehensive, and systematic work of unified science. Possibly because they thought that the Aristotelian corpus had already achieved it, though other factors yet to be investigated were certainly also in operation. They wrote commentaries instead, or monographs, clarifying or treating various points which better expressed what this implicit encyclopedia in their minds contained. So the works of Aristotle, as collected together by Andronicus of Rhodes, were seen to be of an encyclopedic scope and sort of constituted an encyclopedia itself, but it's really more of a blueprint or a kind of raw materials to actually construct such a comprehensive encyclopedia of all learning, of philosophical wisdom. So now, the last thing I'm going to read from Goethe, so same page, continuing on where I just stopped. Avicenna broke the mold.
Okay.
He was the first philosopher ever to write about all philosophical knowledge. The phrase all philosophical knowledge is in italics in Goethe's for emphasis. And he says what he simply called al-ilm, knowledge. Ibn Sina just called it ilm, within a single composition. So Ibn Sina is the first philosopher ever to write about all philosophical knowledge, what he called simply al-ilm, within a single composition as a unified whole. That's the Shifa. Do you understand?
Okay.
So the fact that he's doing this for the first time is why he's going to such trouble to explain here, for example, in the Shifa, in the Ilahiyat of the Shifa, what metaphysics is supposed to be, what good is it, what's its purpose, and where does it fit in terms of rank with the rest of learning or knowledge. And I think he goes to he exerts somewhat greater efforts here in trying to clarify exactly what metaphysics is about, because in Aristotle it's such an obscure book and it's such an obscure subject and so difficult to understand, and it presented a huge difficulty even for a man of Ibn Sina's caliber, because by his own confession, by his own admission, he said he read it 40 times and it wasn't able to figure out what it was trying to say until he came across the Sharh by al-Farabi. And that was what opened the doors or unlocked
Do we
this
have
book
that
for
Sharh
him.
by al-Farabi?
Yes, it's arrived. It's very small.
Okay.
Since you've asked, I think I have a copy here. Al-Farabi, yeah. The Rasail of al-Farabi were published actually in Europe. There was an Orientalist who brought out an edition. And I don't have that edition, but basically that edition was taken. I can't remember who he was. It was published in the 19th century. Then they just retypeset the whole thing as the Rasail al-Farabi, the treatises of al-Farabi. And it was published in Egypt. It's funny, it's called Maktabat al-Usra by Suzanne Mubarak. She was the wife of the president. I lived in Egypt. There were a lot of jokes about that. So
understand Aristotle that much that he wrote the Sharh.
Yeah, so the actual Sharh that we have in mind here is Kitab Ayun al-Masail. Yeah, which one is it? No, maybe this isn't here. Oh, here it is. Sorry. There's in the table of contents in my copy, it's just scratched out. There's a printing problem here. It says كتاب الإبانة عن غرض أرسطوطاليس في كتاب ما بعد الطبيعة. So it's a short book. It stretches over maybe 6 or 7 pages long only. See, in this Egyptian reprint and retypeset, it's starts on 90. It really begins on page 95. Yeah, so that's 2, 4, 6. It's only 6 pages. But somehow, presumably this is what he read. Anyway, whatever the case may be, I was simply trying to make the point that Ibn Sina goes to a great deal of trouble to justify metaphysics, to explain what metaphysics is, what is its actual title, what is the actual name of the science, where does it fit in with the rest of the sciences. And that's what he's doing in the first 3 or 4, actually the first 4 fasls. I think it's only in the 5th fasl that he finally gets into the topic. So now that's what we want to do now. We want to examine this 3rd fasl now that you understand and what he's trying to do. So in this fasl, in this chapter, he's trying to establish what the benefit and what the rank and what the proper name of this science should be. So he says, وَأَمَّا مَنْفَعَةُ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ فَيَجِبُ أَن تَكُونَ قَدْ وَقَفْتَ فِي الْعُلُومِ التي قبل هذا على أن الفرق بين النافع وبين الخير ما هو، وأن الفرق بين الضار وبين الشر ما هو، وأن النافع هو السبب الموصل بذاته إلى الخير، والمنفعة هي المعنى الذي يوصل به من الشر إلى الخير. وإذ قد تقرر هذا فقد علمت أن العلوم كلها تشترك في منفعة واحدة، وهي تحصيل كمال النفس الإنسانية بالفعل مهيئة إياها للسعادة الأخروية. ولكنه إذا فتش في رؤوس الكتب عن منفعة العلوم لم يكن القصد متجها إلى هذا المعنى، بل إلى معونة بعضها في بعض حتى تكون منفعة علم ما هي معنى يتوصل منه إلى تحقق علم آخر غيره. So, regarding the benefit of this science, which again, so far he hasn't given a name, You must have come to know from the sciences preceding this one the difference between the beneficial and the good, and the difference between the harmful and evil. So he wants to explain the benefit of this science. So now he says, well, what does benefit mean? What does harm mean? What is the relation? what is the relationship between the beneficial and the good, and the harmful and evil? And that the beneficial is the cause that in itself leads to the good. وأن النافع هو السبب الموصل بذاته للخير. And that benefit is the idea through which one arrives from evil at the good. Okay, now that this is established, you would have known that all the sciences share in one benefit. So all of the sciences have one benefit in common, namely the attainment of the human soul's perfection in act. تحصيل كمال النفس الإنسانية بالفعل, preparing it or making it ready for posthumous bliss. He says for happiness in the hereafter. Yeah. So his translation is okay, but and when you know Arabic, you will take issue with almost any translation of almost anything, because when you've spent years learning the language, and you'll obviously have your own take on any translation. However, when one looks in the introductions of philosophical books for a statement about the benefit of the sciences, one discovers that the intention is not directed to such a meaning, but rather to the assistance each science renders the other. In other words, if you're studying some other subject like physics or psychology, in the old sense, al-tabi'a, or actually ilm al-nafs would be part of al-tabi'a, according to Ibn Sina, or let's say one of the mathematical sciences of arithmetic or geometry or what have you, or logic. When they talk about the manfa'a of that ilm, when they talk about the benefit of that science, they do not talk about it in reference to the attainment of the soul, the human soul in act, making the human soul an actual an actual thing, or bringing out its potentialities in preparation for the life of the hereafter. They'll say that, for example, logic is an instrumental science that is beneficial in all sciences, for example.
Or maybe the prerequisites of philosophy.
Right, or they'll say that tabi'a or physics is useful for other sciences as well. In other words, they will try and talk about the assistance, as he puts it, each science renders the other. That's what they mean by the manfa'a. The utility would be another way of saying it. So the utility of logic, for example, is that it presumably, if you apply it correctly, prevents you from committing mistakes in thinking. Right? And the principles of mathematics, if you study mathematics properly, it'll be useful for you elsewhere as well. Or it'll be useful in subdivisions of that science of mathematics. Or if you study the principles of physics properly, if you study al-tabi'a correctly, then it'll be of benefit to you in subsets of that science, because medicine is a subset in the classical understanding of things of al-tabi'a, or of natural philosophy. So in other words, the utility of any science is
the validation of another science. That's what he's saying, right? And
yeah.
Okay.
So then the question obviously is that where does metaphysics fit into that? Because he's already said, although he hasn't officially said that metaphysics is first philosophy, he is calling it first philosophy from the very first Fasl of the first Maqala, right?
Right.
And there in the first Fasl of the first Maqala, he says, you may have heard that there is a kind of science which is first philosophy, al-Falsafat al-Ula, and that it is al-Hikmah, that it is true wisdom, al-Hikmatul Haqiqiyya, or whatever. How did he exactly term it? Or al-Hikmah bil Haqiqa, or something to that effect. I don't remember the phrase he used, but it's back in the first Maqala. So now he's actually trying to spell this out in detail. So if we use benefit in this sense, فإذا كانت المنفعة بهذا المعنى فقد يقال قولا مطلقا. So if we use it in this second sense, second is in square brackets here,
If benefit is used
then
in
it can
second
either be spoken of in an absolute sense, excuse me, or be spoken of in a specific manner. وقد يقال قولا مخصصا. Okay? As regards the absolute sense, it consists in the beneficial being conducive to the validation of another science of whatever level. فأما المطلق فهو أن يكون النافع موصلا إلى تحقيق علم آخر كيف كان, of whatever level. كيف كان here means of whatever مرتبة, whatever rank. وأما المخصص فأن يكون النافع موصلا إلى ما هو أجل منه. So as regards of the specific sense, it consists in the beneficial being conducive to the validation of a science higher than it. وهو كالغاية له إذ هو لأجله بغير انعكاس. This higher science acts as the purpose for the lower science, since the latter acts for its sake, and the converse, the other way around, is not the case. Okay?
So we are understanding one science because the purpose of it to understand the second science, or whatever is the goal of.
So he says, if we take then benefit in the absolute sense, فإذا أخذنا المنفعة بالمعنى المطلق كان لهذا العلم منفعة. So if we take benefit in the absolute sense, منفعة مطلقا, then this science, which of course is metaphysics, first philosophy, the divine science, does have a benefit. If we take it in the mutlaq sense, if we take manfa'a.
What exactly is by absolute sense? Like we are taking
Okay,
it, not
so
taking it
back.
as a cause.
So we go back. He says, وَإِذَا كَانَتْ الْمَنْفَعَةُ بِهَذَا الْمَعْنَى فَقَدْ يُقَالُ قَوْلًا مُطْلَقًا. If benefit is used in the second sense.
Which is?
So when we go back, the first sense was what they all have in common, leading to
attainment of
happiness in the life hereafter.
Right.
Okay, but if we take it in the second sense, where each science is serving the purpose of another, or acting as a foundation, intellectually speaking, for another, then if we take it in that sense, it can either be spoken of absolutely. So he says, وَإِذَا كَانَتْ الْمَنْفَعَةُ بِهَذَا الْمَعْنَى. هذا refers back to the previous paragraph.
Okay.
And that's why he puts second here in square brackets. There is no, it doesn't say بِهَذَا الْمَعْنَى الثاني. It doesn't say الثاني, the second there. He's put that himself. Because it's understood. Because the هذا has to go back to, has to refer back to that. The aforementioned, in other words, would be second in that paragraph.
Okay.
Is it clear? So you have to read these things really.
Yeah, it's like.
No, this is not a joke. Okay, so then if we understand that second sense of manfa'a, of benefit, then there too we divide it into two kinds. An absolute and a specific. What he could have said really was more, you could say general and specific. Yeah. I'm not sure absolute is the best way.
That's what I'm confused. Like absolute means like something very, there is no such thing as second to it.
Because he's saying mukhassas, you could say anyway, for the purposes of understanding. So if benefit is used, then if benefit is used in the second sense, then it can either be spoken of in an absolute or be spoken of in a specific. What he really means is in a general. As regards the absolute, in other words, the general sense, it consists in the beneficial being conducive to the validation of another science of whatever level.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay?
Yeah.
And if it's the specific sense, it consists in the beneficial being somehow conducive to the validation of a science higher than it. Now you understand?
Absolute does not make sense in here. Because absolute means higher sense in my regard. Like when he is saying koi sa bhi level ho. Exactly.
So you have to be very careful about the usage of terms.
So I'm not going to say absolute then.
The reason he uses mutlaq in Arabic there because mutlaq, this is the problem with translation. If I say, let me give you some other example. If I ask you, what is the meaning of al-ilm? What is the meaning of the Arabic word knowledge? So some people might say al-ilmu huwa mutlaq al-fahm.
General knowledge, like common sense.
So when you say mutlaq al-fahm, it doesn't mean absolute understanding. It says knowledge refers to understanding in the most general sense. Mutlaq means without any further qualification.
Oh, okay.
So you have طبعا, of course, you have المفهوم التصوري والمفهوم التصديقي.
Right.
أليس كذلك؟ بلى. Of course. So, you know, when you talk about knowledge, and if you talk about notions, you can have a conceptual notion, and notion can also be in the form of judgment or tasdeeq.
Right.
But if you say mutlaq al-fahm, then you just mean understanding in the most general sense.
Yeah.
So I don't think absolute is a good rendering here.
If I read it, I can be confused with this absolute, because for me, absolute is something which is really khas. Khasul khas, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So in Arabic, when you say, oh, I mean such and such mutlaqan, it can mean general, yes. Okay? So the reason that it's mutlaq there, the reason is it's general is because it's beneficial to any science of any rank.
Right.
And it's mukhassas, or he calls it specific, because when it's beneficial to something which is higher than that.
So if I will say logic, it is going to be specific because it's important to understand philosophy.
Precisely. That's the great example.
Right.
Logic is a good one, and it's beneficial because logic is just such an instrumental science. You know, it doesn't really have anything until you sort of apply it in a particular context, right? If you want to give really good examples in logic, you know, logic, you can use it in usul al-fiqh, you can use it in you can use it in medicine, in diagnosis of, you know, you could use it in, it's used in geometry, it's used in arithmetic, it's used anywhere and everywhere.
No, it makes sense.
So now you understand. So hence, if we take benefit in the absolute sense, then metaphysical science does have a benefit.
Okay.
So in other words, if we take in that sense, then al-falsafat al-Ula obviously has benefits to all kinds of sciences of whatever rank. He hasn't yet established what the rank of metaphysics is, but now obviously he's going in that direction. That's what he's trying to do. However, if however we take benefit in the special sense, then this science is above being of use to another science. Rather, the rest of the sciences are of use to it. وإذا أخذنا المنفعة بالمعنى المخصص كان هذا العلم أجل من أن ينفع في علم آخر، or أن ينفع في علم في علم غيره. Excuse me, I read it wrong. بل سائر العلوم تنفع فيه. Okay, on the other hand, if we divide absolute benefit into its division, so now he divides absolute benefit further. So he's sticking with absolute, he's leaving the specific aside, or he's sticking with general and leaving specific aside. On the other hand, if we divide, let's just say specific instead of absolute.
Not specific.
Sorry, general. On the other hand, if we divide general benefit into its divisions, it would consist of three parts. A division wherein that which is conducive to a loftier idea than it.
Loftier idea.
Okay, so remember that the general can apply to any science whatsoever. So now obviously there's only الاحتمالات المنطقية ثلاثة فقط. There's only three logical possibilities. Either it's beneficial to something above, or below, or on the same rank, right? So that's all he's saying. فإذا أخذنا المنفعة بالمعنى المطلق كان لها لكن إذا قسمنا المنفعة المطلقة إلى أقسامها كانت ثلاثة أقسام. قسم يكون الموصل منه موصلا إلى معنى أجل منه، وقسم يكون الموصل منه موصلا إلى معنى مساو له، وقسم etc. إلى معنى دونه. Okay, so in the English he's numbered them. They didn't number them here in the Arabic. I don't know why they do this. Okay, so 1, a division wherein that which is conducive to a loftier idea than it. معنى إلى معنى أجل إلى معنى أجل منه. Yeah. Then 2, a division wherein that which is conducive to an idea equal to it. إلى معنى مساو له. And then the 3rd is a division where the conducive is conducive to an idea lower than it. إلى معنى دونه. Where in effect وهو أن يفيد في كمال دون ذاته. Where in effect it contributes to a perfection lower than itself. So now here again the translations are awful. Okay. So he seems to be wanting to stick with the 3rd, you see?
Yeah.
Where it benefits something which is lower than it in rank. So he then says, if a special name is sought for this, وهذا إذا طلب له اسم خاص كان الأولى به الإفاضة والإفادة. So it's الإفاضة الإفاضة with a dot, والإفادة بالدال, والعناية والرئاسة. You can also say riyasa, and that's how it's written there, but you know, if you're a real stickler, you write it with a hamza. What's the Arab here? وهذا إذا طلب له اسم خاص كان الأولى به الإفاضة والإفادة والعناية أو شيء مما يشبه هذا إذا استقريت الألفاظ الصالحة في هذا الباب عثرت عليه. Okay, so he's saying if a special name is sought for this latter is in square brackets because he just says wahada. He means the aforementioned thing, the last mentioned thing. The most appropriate would be, and this is where it's all screwed up. The most appropriate would be emanation, bestowal, providence, leadership, or some similar thing which you will find once you examine inductively the suitable utterances in this category. In other words, he's saying that if you want to come up with a suitable descriptive name of what a science of this kind is doing, then you would have to use these kinds of words like al-ifada بالضاد, al-ifada بالدال, al-inaya, or al-riasa, or some other word if you look for it. Obviously, when you're looking, that's an inductive process. It's not a deductive process. Right. That's why he said. All right. So, what do these terms mean? It doesn't mean emanation. Ifada doesn't mean emanation. What he means here, you're talking about a knowledge, and the verb is afada yafidu, which you can render it as emanation, but that's not what works here. Okay. If you have, oftentimes these kinds of words are used with respect to teaching in Arabic. If someone is a teacher, if someone is teaching some sort of a class or lecturing on some sort of a science, then they are ifada. It's as though the knowledge is outflowing, right? But the real idea is one of expansion or expounding or explaining, explication. In other words, if you have such a science, and its relation to other sciences is that it is above them in rank, it's higher than them in rank, then it is as though it is expounding the principles on which the lower or the subordinate or inferior, so to speak, in rank sciences. So you have a notion of subordination and superordination. Right. This is the correct English. Yeah, subordination, right. It's the antonym of subordinate is superordinate. And people don't use it much, but it's an English word and it's the correct word here. Usually we just say superior, inferior. Right. But here there's no moral judgment, or this is not used in a social context, obviously. We're talking about the rank in a hierarchy of knowledge or knowing. So ifada has the sense of expounding or explaining at length. You understand? And ifada is to benefit. Ifada, faida. Faida. Benefit. So if you have some really great scholar, for example, you might say, أنه أفاد وأجاد, or لقد أفدتم وأجدتم. You might say that in Arabic. भाई तर्जुमा करने से पहले उबूर होनी चाहिए ज़बान पे. Before you translate, you should know what you're doing. I don't know. Yani Allah yarhamu rahimahullah, he's deceased. But I think he has... Look, I'm not trashing this whole translation. Don't misunderstand me. But obviously,
yeah, but absolute...
Al-kamalu lillahi wahdahu. Perfection is Allah's alone. Wal ismatu li ahliha. And isma is only for those special people, right? So we might be able to find points here, and that's what's happened. And you can see by the context, because after ifada, he's got inaya, and for inaya he says providence. That's also wrong. It's true that providence, al-inayatul ilahiyya, divine providence, you could translate that, but that's not what's meant here. Inaya here, by inaya is meant here a kind of care or concern, perhaps, but that would be used more in a context of a person, like when a teacher takes care of the student. But this is used maybe it's in a figurative sense in inaya.
I feel like this science is kind of a rope where somebody can climb over and make it science perfect.
Well, I mean, since we want to get this right, let's just take some dictionary meanings here. Okay. The good thing about the Hansberg dictionary is that it often gives a huge range of words, so it's almost like a thesaurus, a huge range of English words. I mean, when you look up an entry in Arabic. So this has to be under Ain, Ana. Yeah, it is. It's regard or attention.
Attention.
Yeah. To mean, to worry, to what would be the right word here? I would say to assist or support. It's not there in the dictionary, but that
makes more sense.
What's meant. So if a particular science is higher in rank,
it will assist the lower one or support.
It supports it. It provides, as it were, in the structure of knowledge, a kind of support, on which, in other words, since it provides the foundational principles on which the others are built. Okay, and it is for this reason that such a science would have a position of ri'asa, or again, what? Superordinate status, leadership status, if you will. So, if people are reading this and they're having trouble reading the English translation, I don't blame them. I honestly think that in many places, this English translation is more obscure than the Arabic. But again, then you have to know Arabic very well, right? But I think that he has, in many places, made this book harder to understand than it actually is in the original.
Yeah.
Which begs the question of whether, did he understand the book? Wallahu a'lam. Wallahu a'lam bis-sawab. I don't know. Anyway, so benefit in the specific sense is close to the rendering of service. So in this paragraph 5, Ibn Sina extends on this metaphor, if you like, of khidmah. Okay, so those of us who if we don't know Arabic, if we come from speaking or knowing in another Islamic language like Urdu or Persian, so there's the word khidmah we understand very well. What does it mean to serve?
Right.
والمنفعة المخصصة قريبة من الخدمة وأما الإفادة التي تحصل من الأشرف في الأخص فليس تشبه الخدمة. So manfa'a or benefit is like khidmah or service. But ifada, bestowal or benefit, I think he gives bestowal here, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas the benefit attained by the lower from the lower does not resemble the lower from the nobler does not resemble the rendering of service. So he's trying to clarify the relationship among these sciences through this metaphor of service. Perhaps here we can just read the English part. It says, benefit in the specific sense is close to the rendering of service, whereas the benefit attained by the lower. See, here he has, above, ifada is rendered as bestowal. And here it is rendered as benefit again, rather than bestowal. وَأَمَّا الْإِفَادَةُ الَّتِي تَحْصُلُ مِنَ الْأَشْرَفِ. Yeah, here he has benefit instead of bestowal.
وَإِمَّا إِفَادَةُ الَّتِي تَحْصُلُ. Where is the benefit attained by the lower? Oh, okay.
All right, so he's taken some liberties here. So if you go on, it says, for you know that the servant benefits the one served, and that the one served also benefits the servant. Okay, I mean when benefit is taken in the general sense, where the species and specific aspect of each benefit constitute a species that is other than the rest. Hence, the benefit of this science, again, metaphysics, which is not officially calling metaphysics yet, the benefit of this science is to bestow certainty on the principles of the particular sciences and to validate the quiddity of the things they share in common, even when the latter are not principles. This is important. So let's see, what is the Arabic here. فمنفعة هذا العلم الذي بينا وجهها هي إفادة اليقين بمبادئ العلوم الجزئية. Here bestowal works. The bestowal or conferral or conferring of certainty بمبادئ العلوم الجزئية on the principles of the particular sciences والتحقق الذي هي إفادة والتحقق لماهية الأمور and to validate. So تحقق is validation here. The quiddities of the things they share in common. المشترك فيها وإن لم تكن مبادئ, even when those things are not principles. This then is the benefit of the leader to the subordinate. فهذا إذن منفعة الرئيس للمرؤوس والمخدوم للخادم, and of the one served to the servant. Since the relation of this science to the particular sciences is that of the thing which is the object of knowledge in this science to the things that are the object of knowledge in those sciences. إذ نسبة هذا العلم إلى العلوم الجزئية نسبة الشيء الذي هو المقصود معرفته في هذا العلم إلى الأشياء المقصود معرفتها في تلك العلوم. Okay? He's simply saying that metaphysics is the boss. Metaphysics is the queen of the sciences. Metaphysics is the king. Metaphysics is the Ra'is. Right?
Because it's helping the lower sciences to not only validate themselves, but to attain the higher level.
Yeah. So he says that the relation of this science to the particular sciences is that the thing which is the object of knowledge in this science, in metaphysics, to the things that are the object of knowledge in those sciences. So just as the former, in other words, metaphysics is a principle for the existence of these latter sciences, knowledge of metaphysics is a principle for validating the knowledge of these other sciences. Is it clear now? It's a very wordy passage in Arabic. It's not as bad, in English. It's not as bad in the Arabic. I don't think so. So I don't know. Some places he's too literal. Anyhow.
We are taking metaphysics as a general science or the specific science?
We're taking it as a
general
in the mutlaq, in the general, yeah.
And specifically general, the third point, which means that it is conducive to a lower.
Conducive, not conductive, conducive.
Conducive. Huh. So why I said conductive in there?
You just happen to know.
Okay.
Okay.
Conducive, right? I wrote it down. Conductive.
So now we understand.
Conducive to the lower.
What the nature of its manfa'a is.
Right.
So first of all, he established it does have a manfa'a. Now we understand that its manfa'a or its benefit is at the top of the hierarchy, the apex of the pyramid. And now we look at the rank, or he actually doesn't mean by rank. He means the order. He might be so. Marmura is okay here, I guess. وأما مرتبة هذا العلم yeah the order. وأما مرتبة هذا العلم فهي أن يتعلم. It's not يتعلم. It's very taught. There's no ta there. Is that a shadda? You gotta look at the magnifying glass. I'm going blind here.
Where is it?
وأما paragraph 6, page 14. No, there's a ta that it should be studied. So, as for the rank or order that this science has, it's, in other words, the rank in order of study. So I would have said it, maybe, is that it should be studied when? After having studied, having learned al-tabi'a wal-riyadiyya, or al-ilm al-tabi'i wal-ilm al-riyadi.
Oh, so we have to read this one after that.
Well, actually, it should be learned after you have learned physics and mathematics. Okay.
if this one is the general science and we're supposed to have the knowledge of it before the knowledge of math and natural sciences, don't you?
Well, that's what he's going to discuss now.
Okay.
So, in some ways, metaphysics, or let's just call it this science, this science, al-ilm al-ilahi, the divine science, is in some ways first philosophy, al-falsafat al-Ula, in terms of hierarchy. But in terms of the course of study, it should probably be last philosophy. Okay? And so in some ways, it's ma ba'du tabi'a, it's what's after physics, but in other ways, it is ma qablu tabi'a. And he's going to say that. For our purposes, I've already studied mathematics.
Right.
You have as well. I mean, I got a degree in mathematics. We didn't study traditional mathematics the way these guys did. I mean, their curriculum was different. But if you studied the modern mathematics curriculum, you've studied, obviously not in the same way.
Yeah.
But in modern mathematics, there's no quadrivium. The four. So we don't have it like that. We don't have arithmetic, geometry, mathematical astronomy, and music. We don't do it that way. And there's so many other things which were invented in mathematics since the time of Ibn Sina. Physics, of course, is thought of very differently today than it was then. But in terms of just studying al-haraka wa sukun, we've done a lot of that in physics. Yeah. But again, modern physics looks at it very differently. And this is far, far beyond the scope of this class, certainly today's lecture. But I will say this, that the entire character of physics, of natural philosophy, completely is changed. The whole world is overturned, so to speak, with Isaac Newton. It's a very, very profound change, and many people, even in the history of science, may not be aware of this. And certainly most practicing scientists don't understand this. But the natural order Natural philosophy was viewed very, very differently before Newton and after Newton. And we are very much after Newton. And then that changes again after Einstein. There are some really interesting books on this. If you actually look at Newton's work, there's a very scholarly translation of Newton's Principia. Some people say Principia Mathematica or Principia Mathematica. I think it's what, Cohen is his name?
Mathematica.
Yeah, it's Cohen. So we've got if you look at the Principia, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy, a new translation by I. Bernard Cohen and Anne Whitman, preceded by A Guide to Newton's Principia by I. Bernard Cohen. It's a serious book. That sets out a lot of the stuff there. And there's a book called Concepts of Force by Max Jammer, or Max Jammer, if you like. So there's a lot of things. There's also there's an essay on the difference between the concept of inertia in Isaac Newton and the concept of the unmoved mover, or the concept of motion in Aristotle, by Edward Feser, Feser, in his book Neo-Scholastic Essays. So in that sense, given that there's been such a huge change, it's probably worth your while to try and get an overview of traditional physics. But if you do that, if we take the Physics of Aristotle, that's a very actually readable book, I think. More so than the Metaphysics. But that's my opinion. I'm sure others may not agree with me. But I think it's much shorter than Metaphysics. It's quite readable. There are some really good translations. And really the whole point there in Aristotle is he is looking at change. And he builds up to his proof for the existence of God. So for Aristotle, the proof for the existence of God is the proper place for that in the hierarchy of knowledge or sciences is in physics, not for Ibn Sina. This will also come out shortly. For him, it's metaphysics. So, having just made this, what I think is a relevant or important remark, let us move further along in the chapter. Okay, concerning the order. As regards the natural sciences, this is because many of the things admitted in this science are among the things made evident in the natural sciences. So that, in other words, that's why you should look at physics first. As for example, generation and corruption, al-kawn wal-fasad, change, place, time, zaman. He says تغير الكون والفساد والتغير والمكان والزمان وتعلق كل متحرك بمحرك, etc. The connection of every moved thing by a mover, the termination of all moved things.
Oh, I got this.
وانتهاء المتحركات إلى محرك أول. You see? وغير problem is I didn't read this from the beginning, so I'm not sure what the Arab is here. Anyway, and other things. As for the mathematical sciences, وأما الرياضية فلأن الغرض الأقصى في هذا العلم وهو معرفة تدبير الباري تعالى ومعرفة الملائكة الروحانية وطبقاتها ومعرفة النظام في ترتيب الأفلاك ليس يمكن أن يوصل إلا بعلم الهيئة، وعلم الهيئة لا يوصل إليه إلا بعلم الحساب والهندسة، وأما الموسيقي وجزئيات الرياضيات والخلقيات والسياسة فهي نوافع غير ضرورية في هذا العلم. Okay. So why mathematics? So he says you got to do, so physics and math in the ancient sense, not in the modern sense, are prerequisites for metaphysics. So as for mathematical sciences, this is because the ultimate aim in metaphysics, not in mathematics, namely knowledge of God's governance, knowledge of the spiritual angels and their ranks, and knowledge of the order of the arrangement of the spheres, can only be arrived at through astronomy.
The arrangement of spheres.
Yeah, and astronomy is only arrived at through the science of arithmetic and geometry. As for music and the particular divisions of mathematics and the moral and political sciences, these constitute benefits that are not necessary for this science, for metaphysics. But he's saying, really, if you want to understand, so those maybe are more cosmological ideas. Perhaps nowadays we say that's more a part of cosmology, but what is the entire arrangement of the cosmos as they understood it, not as modern people understand it. Mathematics is necessary for that because al-Hi'a, or mathematical astronomy, was part of al-ilm al-riyadi, or al-ulum al-riyadi, or al-riyadiyat, right? Because it was hisab, or al-arithmatiqi, and al-hindasa, or geometry, and al-majasti, which is a reference to the Almagest of Ptolemy, which is the book which they studied for mathematical astronomy.
Right.
And al-musiqi, right? Music.
And then ethics and politics, which is...
He says ethics, akhlaq, and then home economics and siyasa are not relevant here for this subject, as well as music. Yeah. So, now, here you have an ishkal.
Right.
Okay? This goes to page 18. Approximately. Oh no, it goes to the middle of 19 in the Marmura book. But I think it's good that we're going through it slowly, and we have time today. I'm getting a little thirsty. I'm out of chai ke liye bol dete hain.
19 page.
Hey, Hussein? That chai bana do 2 cup? If there's any chai, wines, put something else there for you. ठीक है, मैंने चाय के लिए कह दिया.
आप पानी ले आए अपने लिए? आपको प्यास लग रही है तो?
नहीं, अब थोड़ी चाय पी लेते हैं. So now, arrange for the chai. So now we go back to work. So now there's an objection here. A questioner, however, may ask إلا أن لسائل أن يسأل فيقول إنه إذا كانت المبادئ في علم الطبيعة والتعاليم. تعاليم means mathematics here. That's what mathematics actually means in Greek.
We are still on page...
احنا 15. So we are on page 15.
Okay, because you said something on page 19, so...
No, that's where we stop.
Oh, I'm like, okay.
We stop at 19. That's where this fossil terminates. So he says, في علم الطبيعة والتعاليم إنما تبرهن في هذا العلم وكانت مسائل العلمين تبرهن بالمبادئ. Okay. So this is actually a good objection. So the objector is going to say, if the principles in the natural sciences and mathematics are only demonstrated in this science, يعني metaphysics,
right,
and if the questions in those two sciences, math and physics, are demonstrated through the principles, and if the principles of those two sciences become principles for this science, in other words, metaphysics, this would be a circular demonstration. You understand how it's going in a circle? So he's saying that you have mathematics and you have physics, but you've just said that their principles are only demonstrated in metaphysics. And if the questions in these two sciences of math and physics are demonstrated through the principles of metaphysics, and if the principles of those two sciences become principles for this metaphysical science as well, then you've moved in a circle. So how do you avoid the circle? It's circular reasoning. How do you avoid this circular discourse or circumlocution? He says, وَكَانَتْ مَسَائِلْ ذَيْنِكَ الْعِلْمَيْنِ تصير مبادئ هذا كان ذلك بيانا دوريا. It is circuitous, or it is a circumlocution. What did our good
Tawaf
friend Mr.
kara.
Marmura say for this? Circular demonstration. Becoming the final analysis is a demonstration of a وَيَسِيرُ آخر الأمر بيانا لشيء من نفسه. That's exactly what we wanted to say, yeah. In the final analysis, a demonstration of a thing from itself. Okay. Ibn Sina says that I've already dealt with this problem in Kitab al-Burhan at the beginning of the Shifa, where I talk about mantiq in the book of demonstration or Burhan. And so he's referring you there if you want to read it in detail, but he's saying I'm only going to quote from that part or paraphrase or summarize from Kitab al-Burhan what I need to make my point.
All right.
That's what he does in the next paragraph, which is here numbered paragraph 8. So the principle of a science is not a principle merely because all the questions depend on it for their demonstrative proofs, actually or potentially. Rather, the principle may be taken in the demonstrations of some of these questions. إن المبدأ للعلم ليس إنما يكون مبدأ لأن جميع المسائل تستند في براهينها إليه بفعل أو بقوة، بل ربما كان المبدأ مأخوذا في براهين بعض هذه المسائل. You understand? So it's not for all, but for some. Moreover, it is possible that there are questions in the sciences whose demonstrations do not employ something posited from other sciences at all, but only use premises that have no demonstrations proving them. ثم قد يجوز أن تكون في العلوم مسائل براهينها لا تستعمل وضعا البتة، بل إنما تستعمل المقدمات التي لا برهان عليها. It's at moments like these that you wish that they would give examples.
Yeah, that's what I was exactly thinking.
So he says it's possible that there are questions in the sciences, okay, whose demonstrations do not employ something that has been, asserted in some other sciences at all, but only use premises that have no demonstrations proving them. I cannot, for the life of me, come up with an example. But only use premises that have no demonstrations proving them. So the principle of a science, however, is only a truly scientific principle if its adoption bestows the certainty acquired from the cause. If, however, it does not give the cause, then it is only said to be a principle of a science in a different manner. It is more fitting to speak of it as a principle in the way that sense is said to be a principle, where sense, inasmuch as it is sense, bestows only knowledge of existence. So he is saying that there can be questions whose demonstrations do not employ something which is established in another science, but only use principles that have no demonstration. In other words, what we call, what is the term? Axioms, unprovable axioms, or some sort of common notions.
So basically they're trying to say that metaphysics is not going to solve all the problems that is going to be in arithmetic or physics, but might able to solve some of the problems. That's what it is, or it's other way around.
Yeah, it's saying that if you have principles in mathematics, right? That let's go back here. So you have certain principles in mathematics, right? Which are only demonstrated in metaphysics, presumably. Yeah, and if the questions in these two sciences are demonstrated through the principles, No, now I myself am getting confused. I have to drink some tea now.
The principle of that is not a principle of unity because all the questions depend on it. Demonstrative proof.
Oh, so if you read further, he says the doubt hence is removed, for the natural principle Meaning a principle from physics can either be self-evident or be demonstrated in first philosophy through that which is not demonstrated by the natural principle thereafter. But there is no example of this. This is the problem.
How come Ibn Sina writing down something and not giving example to make it more clear?
Because he assumes that we know. So we can refer to some commentaries. So that's no good. من 15 مأخوذا في براهين. ثم قد يجوز أن تكون في العلوم مسائل براهين لا تستعمل وضعا البتة بل إنما تستعمل مقدمات لا برهان عليه. So here we should have something. Oh yeah. This is good. So there's a comment on this here in the commentaries, but it doesn't. I'm not sure who this is. He just gives the letter Ba. Who does Ba stand for? I have to check. So it says. So on the part where it says ثم قد يجوز, ثم قد يجوز. We don't have edition that has all of these in one place. That's the problem we have. That's why we have 4 books open here on the table here. So إنما استخدم المقدمات التي لا برهان عليها. Did we read this part? إن المبدأ للعلم ليس ما يكون مبدأ أن يجب أن ستستند في براهين إليه بل ربما كان مأخوذا في براهين بعض المسائل. Yeah. So after that, وقد يجوز أن تكون في العلوم مسائل. You have to find the passage in your edition.
And what is Sashram? What is saying over there? Which one? I didn't say Sayyad.
Where do we have إلا أن سائل يسأل? إلا أن, okay, that's paragraph 7. Then it goes to إن المبدأ للعلم.
8.
That's paragraph 8. Then it goes to المسائل. ثم قد يجوز أن تكون في العلوم مسائل براهينها. Yeah. We're on paragraph 8, line 10 to 11. Okay. Paragraph 8 in the Marmura, line 10 to 11. So he says ثم قد يجوز أن تكون في العلوم مسائل not برهانيا براهينها لا تستعمل وضعا البتة بل إنما تستعمل المقدمات التي لا برهان عليها. So how does Marmura render that in English? He says, moreover, it is possible that there are questions in the sciences whose demonstrations do not employ something positive at all, but only premises that have no demonstrations proving them. Exactly. So the Sharh says here, لأن مسائل العلوم النظرية المدونة لا يجوز أن تكون جميعها نظرية. So, in other words, every question in theoretical sciences need not itself be theoretical. Okay?
Not to be theoretical.
Yeah, that's how you avoid getting a وإلا يلزم التسلسل أو الدور. Otherwise, you would end up with some sort of a circular reasoning or circular discourse. بل لابد أن تنتهي النظرية إلى البديهية التي لا يحتاج إلى البرهان كما قرر في موضعه. So that's true. For example, in geometry or in any subject, you ultimately have to go back to certain principles which don't have a proof, but which are assented to, or which are known without proof, or what's called badahatan, or a priori.
Okay.
Because ultimately that's what's going to happen, because if you take everything all the way back, then you come down to certain laws of logic, and you come down to basically 3 laws of logic. The law of identity, and the law of non-contradiction, and the law of excluded middle. And if you don't accept those, then there can't be any logical discourse. So the law of non-contradiction is al-Qadaya. It's the most fundamental sort of proposition that you have to accept. So he says then that the doubt is removed in this fashion. The doubt is فقد ارتفع إذن الشك فإن المبدأ الطبيعي يجوز أن يكون بينا بنفسه. For the natural principle can either be self-evident or be demonstrated in first philosophy. ويجوز أن يكون بيانه في الفلسفة الأولى بما ليس يبين به فيما بعد, through that which is not demonstrated by the natural principle thereafter. So he just elaborates on that further. And then he says, it is also possible that the natural وقد يجوز أن يكون العلم الطبيعي أو الرياضي and mathematical sciences would have yielded for us only a demonstration of the fact, even if it did not yield for us demonstration of the reasoned fact. برهان أن وإن لم يفدنا فيه برهان. This is wrong again. That's not burhan. There's no burhan an. It's burhan in. There's al burhan al inni wal limmi. Did you study the mantiq of Muzaffar?
Ji.
So the differences between these are explained there. It has to do with the
Ammi and limmi.
burhan inni and burhan limmi. Okay. So then he says, it has thus become clear that which is in some manner a principle of this metaphysical science, being at the same time one of the questions in natural science, is something whose demonstration either does not follow. So now you have all these cases. فقد اتضح أنه إما أن يكون ما هو مبدأ بوجه ما لهذا العلم المسائل التي في العلوم الطبيعية ليس بيانه من مبادئ تتبين في هذا العلم بل من مبادئ بينة بنفسها وإما أن. This is really long. Okay, it has thus become clear that which is in some manner a principle of metaphysical science, being at the same time one of the questions in the natural sciences, is something whose demonstration either does follow from metaphysical principles,
does not follow from
metaphysical principles, but from principles that are badihi or self-evident, or follows from principles that are questions in metaphysics, but which do not revert to become principles for these self-same questions, but for other questions. It follows then that are questions, but which do not revert to become principles. So they're not self-referential. They don't go back on themselves. Or the third one is that it could be that these later principles are things belonging to metaphysics for proving the existence of that whose whyness. Again, this is not whyness. This is burhan limmi.
Oh, burhan limmi.
Is intended to be shown in this science.
Burhan limmi. Okay. Whyness.
So, what's the whole problem then with al-burhan al-inni and al-limmi? Why is he going there?
I don't even know why they're going just make a simple point.
He's going into a lot of detail. So he's saying وَيَجِبُ أَن تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ فِي نَفْسِ الْأَمْرِ طريقا إلى أن يكون الغرض من هذا العلم تحصيل مبدأ لا بعد علم آخر فإنه سيتضح لك فيما بعد إشارة إلى أن لنا سبيلا إلى إثبات المبدأ الأول. This is where he's going. لا من طريق الاستدلال من الأمور المحسوسة بل من طريق مقدمات كلية عقلية توجب للوجود مبدأ واجب الوجود وتمنع أن يكون متغيرا أو متكثرا في جهة وتوجب أن يكون هو المبدأ للكل وأن يكون الكل يجب عنه على ترتيب الكل. Essentially, he's saying here that, well, I just read this big thing in Arabic. So in English, it's going to be, you ought to know, Marmura translation, that within the subject itself, there is a way to show that the purpose in this science is to attain a principle without requiring first another science. Why? Why does he want to show that metaphysics is self-sufficient? Because it will become clear to you, he says, later, through an intimation, that we have a way for proving the first principle, in other words, God, not through inference from sensible things, but through universal rational premises that necessitate the conclusion that there must be for existence a principle that is necessary in its existence, that renders it impossible for the latter to be in any respect multiple or changing, and that necessitate the conclusion that this principle is the principle of the whole of other existence, and that this whole is necessitated by the principle according to the order possessed by the whole. This is his reference. He isn't calling it that here, but he mentions later, I think he mentions it in al-Isharat. His book Remarks and Admonitions, al-Isharat wa Tanbihat, that there is a proof for the existence of God, which is his discovery, which is what he calls Burhan al-Siddiqeen. And this is what's so important here. After all of this going around, all of this verbiage and all of this deep discussion, you remember he was talking about physics. And I mentioned to you about, earlier about the physics of Aristotle.
Right.
And that the culmination of the physics of Aristotle was the proof for the existence of God, known as the proof of by what's called the unmoved mover.
Right.
Well, for Ibn Sina, the thing that is sought after in metaphysics is the proof for the existence of God.
Right.
Right? We mentioned that, I think, in the first talk, the first lecture. And the proper subject, the proper place for proving the existence of God is actually metaphysics, on the basis of metaphysical principles alone, not physics. Because physics studies what? Bodies, al-jism, al-tabi'i. But he says there is a way to prove the existence of God without reference to notions which are there without recourse to the physical world, really. In other words, on the basis of noetic principles only, principles of reason. And that is why he calls it Burhan al-Siddiqeen, because it's not based on things as such. It's not based on physical bodies. His proof is based on the distinction between the contingent and the necessary.
So now he's saying that.
And contingent and necessary, of course, are intelligibles. They are noetic things. They are ma'qulat. And he's using those only to prove the existence of God. The notion of contingency or al-imkan and the notion of wujub. And that's what he calls his Burhan al-Siddiqeen, of which he doesn't set out here in this chapter. And he calls it that in what you call it, Kitab al-Isharat wa Tanbihat. Okay, so
we are saying that.
So the principles of metaphysics are autonomous. And it's very important that they be autonomous, because on the basis of those autonomous and independent principles of metaphysics, we can prove the existence of God. And so now he comes to after that long paragraph, he comes to his grand conclusion. فَإِذًا مِنْ حَقِّ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ فِي نَفْسِهِ أَنْ يَكُونَ مقدما على العلوم كلها، إلا أنه من جهتنا يتأخر عن العلوم كلها، فقد تكلمنا على مرتبة هذا العلم من جملة العلوم. I skipped one sentence. He said earlier after we read all that, he said, لكن لعجز أنفسنا لا نقوي على سلوك ذلك الطريق. Yeah, we are unable, we're not strong enough. Due to our weakness, however, we are not strong enough, or we are not able to tread the path of this demonstrative method. I'm using my own translation. He said, adopt this demonstration, which is a method of arriving at the secondary existence. الذي هو السلوك عن المبادئ إلى الثواني. Arriving at the secondary principles, or the secondary existence from the primary principles, and from cause to effect. In other words, he's saying that most people are not going to be able to understand this or see this proof. That's really what he's pointing to. This proof that he has in mind. Because we're not arguing on the basis of cause and effect. We're not using causality. We're not using motion. We're not using any aspect, any physical aspect at all. We're only using metaphysical principles to prove the existence of God. Therefore, فإذا من حق هذا العلم في نفسه أن يكون مقدما على العلوم كلها. Thus, therefore, by its own right, this science should be prior to all the other sciences. Okay? But, as I said before, early on in this lecture, from our point of view, it is posterior to all of them. It comes after all of them. Okay? So now he's done discussing the rank.
So basically, he's saying because mathematics and physics can only explain the cause and effect when it comes to the physicality of the world, but it cannot explain the necessity being, or a wujub.
Yeah.
So for that particular reason, metaphysics is supposed to be higher than mathematics. Falsafatul Ula.
It's higher than physics. Whether it's higher or than mathematics, it's definitely higher than mathematics as well. But later, the rest of the chapter is devoted to objections, saying that wait, mathematics is an abstract subject.
Okay.
But then, in a word, what he says is, yeah, it does. It does have an abstract dimension. But when we use mathematics in the final analysis, we always take it back to things which are concrete.
Yeah.
In the external world.
Yeah.
Because that's what we use it for. That's what he says. There wasn't really a concept, I don't know, at least not in the modern sense, of just pure mathematics. Like there is today. There's something called, there's pure and there's applied. Right? But that point aside, you are correct in what you're saying. So he's talked about the manfa'a, the benefit. Right. He's talked about the rank. So the manfa'a is that, yeah, definitely it has a benefit, and we take manfa'a in its absolute or its general sense, right? And then we say that so it has a benefit, and its rank is at the top of the pyramid of the hierarchy of sciences. And now, what's its proper name? That's the next part. As for the name, وَأَمَا اسْمُ هَذَا الْعِلْمِ فَهُوَ مَا بَعْدُ الطَّبِيعَةِ. It is metaphysics, that which is after nature. مَا بَعْدُ الطَّبِيعَةِ. Okay? Right. What is after nature? What is after natural philosophy? By nature is not meant the power. So now he gets into tabi'ah. Because in classical physics, natural philosophy, they discuss what is meant by the term at-tabi'ah. So he says, وَيَعْنِي بِالطَّبِيعَةِ لَا الْقُوَّةِ الَّتِي هِيَ مَبْدَأ حَرَكَةٍ وَسُكُونٍ. By nature is not meant the power which is the principle of motion and rest, but the totality of the things that come about through corporeal matter. بَل. So he's not interested in, saying that by a tabi'ah he doesn't mean just al-jism al-tabi'i or anything which is subject to motion or change. Right. He says جملة الشيء الحادث عن المادة الجسمانية وتلك القوة والأعراض. The totality of the things that come about through corporeal matter, including the latter power and accidents. For it has been said that nature is said of the natural body. فقد قيل إنه قد يقال الطبيعة للجرم الطبيعي. الجرم الطبيعي is just الجسم الطبيعي. الذي له الطبيعة. As I just said a second ago. والجرم الطبيعي هو الجرم المحسوس بما له من الخواص والأعراض. ومعنى ما بعد الطبيعة بعدية بالقياس إلينا. For it has been said that nature is said of the natural body that has the natural body being the sense body along with what belongs to it by way of properties and accidents. The meaning of that which is after nature involves a posteriority relative to us. For when we first observe existence and get to know its states, we observe this natural existence. Okay, as for that which this science, in other words, metaphysics, if considered in itself, deserves to be named, is, so to speak, of it, the science of what is prior to nature. In other words, قبل الطبيعة. So we can either call it ما بعد الطبيعة, what is after nature, or what is prior to nature, ما قبل الطبيعة. لأن الأمور المبحوث عنها في هذا العلم هي بالذات وبالعموم قبل الطبيعة. Because, so we can say it's prior to nature, because the matters investigated in this science are in terms of essence and generality prior to nature. So we can conceive of it in both ways. But generally speaking, the term that is used for it is ما بعد الطبيعة. But since its principles are absolutely fundamental, we can say it's قبل الطبيعة as well. Do you follow? It's just like it's both first philosophy and last philosophy. It's both before physics and after physics.
But the thing is, I mean,
both relationships hold if seen from a certain perspective.
Yeah, I mean, like, and from practical perspective, if you want to understand metaphysics, you need to know physics. But it's not in the real world, because the metaphysics comes before physics in that regard. Like,
yeah,
it makes sense, right? This is tough. How was I?
DJ.
Oh my God.
Yeah, of course it's tough. Why do you think nobody reads this book anymore? You know, people do read it, but I'm sure it's a minority of people.
Yeah.
I think that's also why there's no PDF of this book available on the internet that I've been able to find of Kitab al-Shifa.
Yeah, there's no PDF.
Okay, so let's not lose our momentum here. Now, over the next couple of pages, so paragraphs 14 to 18. So, and that's in Marmura. So that's from page 17, like line 10, up to page 19, line 10, is all dealing with objections.
Regards to arithmetic.
Yeah, with regards to mathematics. So, a lot of what he says there can simply be summarized by saying that, well, the objection could be raised that mathematics also deals with abstract things. All right, so at this point, I'm going to dispense reading the English and the Arabic, and I'm simply going to give you my take on it, because I read that part very carefully.
Okay.
And we also think of mathematics a little bit differently nowadays. But essentially what he's saying is that, yeah, you have certain general notions there. So, abstract notions. So with mathematics, we have the abstract notion of quantity.
Right.
This is the key point. الكم المتصل والكم المنفصل.
Right.
And you can argue about, whether we're going to put arithmetic first or geometry first. But the fact is that in the ancient world, the classic work for mathematics and for all posterity, even now, it's like it's an idolized, it's an iconic work, is the Elements of Euclid.
Right.
It's an axiomatic work. It's very organized. So it became sort of the model for mathematical reasoning. And there is an arithmetic portion in it, actually. There is a section in there that deals with really proportions and ratio and proportion.
Right.
Ratio and proportion are different. A lot of people use them, synonymously, but they're not. At any rate, what is at stake what is being studied in geometry, really? It's measure. It's a kind of measure. But it's measure without reference to units of measure. They had units of measure in the ancient world. I don't know what the Greeks used, but in the Islamic world they used a dhira'a, or cubit, which was supposedly the length from your elbow to the tip of your middle finger. And there were various other weights and measures. Every society, every civilization has them. But in the Greek understanding of geometry, they weren't using any units of measurement. Like today we would use centimeters and so forth. And if you study geometry the traditional way, I don't know if they even teach it anymore, if you actually do constructions, you use a compass and a straight edge, and the straight edge you don't measure with the straight edge. So in geometry, the first thing which they do in Euclid, the first shakl as they call it, the first thing you do is you study the equilateral triangle, and you actually construct an equilateral triangle. So they say if you've got a line segment, and that segment becomes your unit, then we're not calling it anything, we're just calling it the unit. And so I give you a line segment, I draw it somewhere, and I say I want you to construct an equilateral triangle on the basis of this segment. In other words, I want a triangle whose sides are all that length that I've given you. So what you do is you put your compass down on one end, and you set your compass to the length of that segment, and you draw a circle. Then you go to the other end of the segment. If we have segment AB, then you will draw a circle of center B and radius BA and go around. Then go to point A and put your compass down and do the same thing.
So it's like two same.
Yeah, and they will intersect, and that will create a kind of curve, two intersecting circles. And the first circle will intersect the center of the second, and the second will intersect the center of the first. Right? And then you will create a common area between them, and that shape is called the vesica Pisces. And then you connect the
A, B, and then
you connect the center, which was A to B is already connected, and then you draw them upwards to that vertex, and they will be the same length. You can draw them downwards, and you'll have two congruent equilateral triangles. So those two triangles are congruent. So congruency is a big thing in geometry. You want to prove that triangle ABC is congruent, not equal, is congruent to triangle QRS. And what that means is that if you were actually able to cut it out on paper, it would fit on top of it. So in modern mathematics, we would say that there is an isometry, either through translation, reflection, or other rotations, other manipulations that would cause that thing to fit on top of the other one. And then the other notion in geometry is similarity. So congruence means same shape and size. But similarity means same shape but not the same size. So if two triangles are similar, they have all the same angles, but their sides are not the same length.
And that's called similar.
That's called similar, yeah. Similar triangles, similar, So you have congruence of shapes in geometry. In a plane, you have congruence of three-dimensional shapes as well.
The similarity means like same shape but not the size.
Not the same size. So that is miqdar in Arabic. That's measure. All right? So you have some abstract notion of measure that you are studying. And you can have an abstract notion of that, but that is not a metaphysical thing.
You are saying miqdar when it comes to similarity or the
No, miqdar means measure.
The measure.
That's al-kam al-muttasil. That's continuous quantity. So even though, the objection here is that, well, in the real world, in the external world, there really is no such thing as a circle. There really is no such thing as a triangle, etc. There's no point, there's no line, there's no plane. So there's this idea, these are in our mind. Yes, it's true, and we establish these things in our mind, but in the final analysis, we always come back to some external representation, even if they're not perfect. So it's not a purely noetic kind of reality. And the real, at least in those days, the purpose of mathematics, of doing all of this was, land surveying. It had various applications. Geometry.
So we have tasawwur and tasdeeq for them.
So then in arithmetic also you have the same idea that, well, we have an abstract notion of number. Yes, we do. But in the final analysis, when we use it, we always talk about 3 apples or 3 liters of juice or 3 kilograms of potatoes or what have you. So there is al-adad min haythu huwa al-adad. There is number qua number. But in the final analysis, we always come back to the ma'dud. That's the kind of argument that he's trying to make. So it's for saying that mathematics is not a rival to metaphysics. So he says, but it is in metaphysics that we do study number as number. It's not really in mathematics that you study number purely as number, at least in the way that they understood it. And there he comes up with some interesting points, because earlier on in, I think, the second Fasl of the first Maqala, he says that in metaphysics we study wujud and we also study al-wahid. Let's see if we can find the passage. المقالة الثانية. Sorry, المقالة الأولى الفصل الثاني.
Maybe paragraph 16.
Oh, did you find it? So read it out. Where is it?
Maybe. This one is the first cause, and the first. And because of this, these signs are more particular principle of medicine, but no, it's not that. In this part, there's a number of different sense, and let me see that this is hint. Share something wrong with dialectical concept of elements.
Well, see if you can find it. But the point is,
paragraph 16 on page 11.
What does he say? You found it?
No, I'm like, maybe is this the one?
Oh, what does it say?
Page number 16. What adheres necessarily to this science, therefore, is that it is necessarily divided into parts. Maybe in this we are talking about. And because the principle of each science that is more particular or things first after in the higher science, as for example the principles of medicine, geometry, and of surveying first to occur in the sense that the principles of the particular science that investigate the states of the particular existence are clarified therein. The states of existence and the things that belong to it akin, division of species. Mathematics begin. It's on para 17, line 25.
What does he say?
And this sign investigates and estimates the state of affairs prior to such recipient to. For this signs are the causes of existence, and which is cause existent. No, it's not saying this too.
Yep, here it is. وهو الوجود والوحدة. So this is المقالة الأولى الفصل الثاني. But it's on page 15 in the Cairo edition.
So what is the Arabic starts with? فهذا هو العلم.
Yeah, he says فتكون إذا مسائل هذا العلم في أسباب الموجود المعلول بما هو موجود معلول وبعضها في عوارض الموجود. It's a long passage. وهو العلة الأولى وأول الأمور في العموم وهو الوجود والوحدة. So let me see if I can find it in the Michael Marmura translation. This happened the last time as well.
And you said فهذا.
Okay, it's on page 11.
Page 18.
No, it's on page 11.
No, the
paragraph 18.
One, yeah.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so he says, this then is the science sought after in the start. It is first philosophy because it is knowledge of the first thing in existence, namely the first cause, and the first thing in generality, namely existence and unity.
Yeah.
Existence and unity. So this is the key. Because as we learned in the Tajreed class, al-wujudu yusawiqu ash-shay'iyya. So wujud is coextensive with thingness, but wujud is also coextensive with wahda. وَيُسَاوِقُ الْوُجُودِ الْوَحْدَةَ. That's very, very important. Because in ancient mathematics, we're coming back to mathematics,
Right.
wahid, or the number one, what we call the number one, was not really considered a number.
Oh, in Asian mathematics.
Mm-mm.
Okay.
It was considered the source of number, or the reflection of number. So if you take 1 as a number, then 2 is the superposition of 1 and 1, and 3 is the superposition of 1 with 2. 3 is 2 plus 1, 2 is 1 plus 1. And so they didn't consider the 1 to be a number. They considered it to be outside of number. Because it's reflected in all aggregates, in every aggregation or every agglomeration or every manifold. 1 is reflected there, because every collectivity and every multiplicity can be conceived of as a unity. So we speak of a dozen eggs, right? Ek darjan anda. A dozen eggs. Or, you may have some indeterminate bag full of peanuts or jelly beans.
Like
and you say, well, I bought a bag of jelly beans, right? When you go to the
it's
store.
It's a unity of ones, basically.
It's a unity. If you go to a shop now and you buy a bag of peanuts, it's not going to tell you how many peanuts are there. If anything, especially in America, they label everything, but it'll be labeled in pounds or ounces and grams. But it's understood that you have bought a bag. Now, I've never done this, but I suppose you could probably go and buy a whole bunch of bags of M&Ms and count how many M&Ms are in a bag. And this is America. It's an industrial manufacturing society. They probably have worked out the average number. I doubt, or maybe they all have the same number. But there is some weight of M&Ms that goes in, right? But we speak of a bag of M&Ms. If you tell your kids, if you have 4 kids and you want to buy them M&Ms, right? You buy 4 bags of M&Ms. But you speak of 1 bag of M&M. So that bag becomes a unit.
Right.
So every multiplicity can be conceived of as a unity. So unity was not really seen of as being a number. It's a very interesting point. And in fact, in the Nahj al-Balagha, we have some very interesting statements by Imam Ali alayhi salam. We'll try and wrap things up here. But Imam Ali alayhi salam, in khutbah number 152, khutbah 152, يقول الإمام علي عليه السلام: الحمد لله الدال على وجوده بخلقه وبمحدث خلقه على أزليته وباشتباههم على أن لا شبه له لا تستلمه المشاعر ولا تحجبه السواتر لافتراق الصانع والمصنوع والحد والمحدود والرب والمربوب الأحد بلا تأويل عدد. Praise is due to Allah, who points to His existence by His creation and to the temporal origination of His creation by His beginningless eternity. In Latin, that's aeternitas a parte ante. And by their mutual similarity, points to Him not being similar to anything. Neither does cognition perceive Him, nor does covering veil Him, due to the separateness between the maker and the made, the limiter and the limited, the sustainer and the sustained, the one, yet without being construed numerically, or the unique, al-ahad bila ta'wili adad. So it's qul huwa Allahu ahad, right? Say, a lot of people translate that as say Allah is the one. It's better if you say Allah is the unique. Like in Urdu or Persian, we would say yakta, yagane, right? And in the Khutbah 185, there's a long passage. I don't want to read out the whole thing, but at the end of that, it's also in the beginning. The Alhamdulillah alladhi la tudrikuhu shawahid is how it begins. So he goes on, and it says, Wahidun la bi'adad. In other words, that Allah is one but without being a number. Because Wahid or Ahad simply isn't a number, but it is reflected in all multiplicity. Just as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, al-Ahad, is reflected in all multiplicity. And so again, the mathematical or the geometrical symbolism is very beautiful. If you take a compass and you put it down and you draw a circle, the circumference is there. Al-Muhit, Muhitud Da'ira, you see it because you've drawn it. The center, you typically don't draw it in. It's where you put the compass, but the center determines all the points on the circumference. Why? Because a circle, by definition, is the locus of points that is equidistant from a fixed point. And that equidistance is the radius. And so the same as the sphere in 3 dimensions, and you can go to n dimensions. But that center of the circle is mawjood, is present with every point on the circumference, but it is not there at the same time. Gorak dandai. It's a paradox, right? So this is the same idea. So the number 1 is reflected in every multiplicity. Think of any crazy huge number. 6,750,375,252,156. But that's one number.
Yep. Makes sense.
So this is an ancient notion. And it goes back to time immemorial. So in the Enneads of Plotinus, there's a new translation by Lloyd Garrison, but I very much like the wording of the Stephen McKenna translation. In the very last Ennead, the very last treatise, in other words.
Can you find as well in that one? Because I have this one, that book.
Yeah, you just turn to the last one. It's the 9th tractate. Okay. Yeah, so it's in Enneads is Roman numeral 6.9. Okay, because it's divided into 6 books.
Okay.
And it's the 9th one in the 6th book that says, on the good or the one. It is in virtue of unity that beings are beings. This is equally true of things whose existence is primal, and of all that are in any degree to be numbered among beings. What could exist at all except as one thing? Deprived of unity, a thing ceases to be what it is called. No army unless a unity. A chorus, a flock must be one thing. Even house and ship demand unity. One house, one ship. Unity gone, neither remains.
Right.
Thus, even continuous magnitudes could not exist without an inherent unity. Break them apart, and their very being is altered in the measure of the breach of unity. And it goes on. It's beautiful. Proclus, who is in the Silsila of Aflatun, of Plato, in his book, The Elements of Theology, Oxford University Press, revised text with translation, introduction, commentary by E.R. Dodds. Yeah, I think 1963. The very first proposition in The Elements of Theology is every manifold in some way participates unity. He doesn't say participates in unity. He likes to use this as a transitive verb rather than an intransitive. Every manifold in some way participates unity. And then he gives a proof.
Unity, not in.
He gives a proof. So every collection, every collectivity, every multiplicity participates, I'm going to use it in the conventional way, in unity in some way or another. And he proves it by saying that, look, if you divide it, then if we assume that it doesn't, then we are led to an infinite regress, because then we'll have an infinite conglomeration. infinitely, and that's not possible. But here also, infinity is also conceived of mentally as a unity. So the one is reflected in all multiplicity. فَأَيْنَمَا تَوَلُّوا فَثَمَّ وَجْهُ اللَّهِ. Whithersoever you turn, there is the face of God, the countenance of God. So mathematics, as it was conceived in the ancient world, is not metaphysics, but there are principles in mathematics, like the notion of the one, which are truly only understood in metaphysics, because metaphysics, as the science of being, qua being, al-wujud min haythu huwa al-wujud, is, we establish that being is coextensive with unity. Al-wujudu yusawiqu al-wahda. Okay. ونكتفي بهذا القدر, and this amount suffices. والله أعلم بالصواب.